Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're concluding our study of the book of Philemon today. We've been studying Philemon as a textbook in persuasion, and we've mentioned several motivators that Paul used, beginning with love, virtue, respect, a shared history, expectations. We've talked about accountability. We've talked about guilt. Um, but what we didn't mention, and maybe I should have mentioned as a persuader, it's just so lightly um, applied uh, that it's easy to miss, and that's why I want to call attention to it. To it, he begins and ends the book with grace. Grace, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. In verse 25, may the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirit. You have been given grace. And now you're expected to give grace to our brother Onesimus. Maybe I should have included grace as part of expectation. I don't know. But grace begins and ends the letter. And and grace really is the great motivating factor for any sincere Christian. Let's talk about the possible outcomes. Did he do the right thing? Did he set Onesimus free and send him back to Paul? I like to think that he did. Um, if he did, he didn't send him to Cancun or to Santorini. He sent him to Rome in the midst of severe persecution of Christians, where Christians, because they were Christian, were being burnt alive, were being fed to the beasts um, um, in the public games. Um, he was being sent back not just to Rome, but to Paul in prison, to go on a daily basis to the Mamertine pit prison to take care of Paul's needs as a prisoner there. And so let's not forget that Paul is is asking for, and Onesimus is has the full expectation of the hardship. He really is sending Onesimus almost certainly to his own incarceration and probably his own death as a martyr for the cause of Jesus Christ. So let's never forget that. What if he didn't do what Paul asked? Well, if he didn't do what Paul asked, he was going to, for our conversation about what Paul has already said and the accountability that Paul has laid out, the way that Paul has already turned on the Klieg lights in every corner of the room. So um, whatever he does in public in front of everybody. If he makes the decision to do the wrong thing, that decision will knock down dominoes that will keep falling for some time. In the first place, when you choose to be the villain in your own story and not to do the right thing, and everybody sees it, how often do you just double down because of your own personal pride? Especially if you're a man of wealth and power, the way Philemon evidently was. And so, personally, this could have been the first in a long line of bad choices that would have led him to destruction. His soul that Paul had worked hard to save would now be lost because he didn't do this one good thing for the want of a nail, for the want of a nail, the battle is lost. And this is more important than a nail. This is a human life. But it's more than just one human life. And it's more than just an earthly life. It's about Onesimus's life. It's also about Philemon's soul. That's what's at stake. And what about this church that meets in his house? In the book of Colossians, we read this at the beginning of our study. Paul in that letter, which was delivered at the same time by the same hands, in that letter he says to Archippus, the preacher, do your job. Paul knows that this is going to be tough. It's going to be challenging for the congregation. The congregation meets on his property. If he decides to do the wrong thing, he's going to affect the congregation, the entire congregation. He may split it. He may split it in half, or he may take from this congregation some of their necessary resources, like a place to meet. Um, it's going to hurt other people and a lot of other people and for a long time. And that in itself is a lesson. When we fail to do the right thing, it doesn't happen in a closet and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is seen by others and it affects others. And so, in that way, in considering this letter, Paul has given us another tool to use, which is think of the possible outcomes if you don't do the right thing. Okay. Thank you so much for this study. I hope it's been a blessing to you. And so when we are together the next time, we are going to uh, go back to the Psalms, and we're going to look at Psalm 1. And we're going to talk about Psalm 1 as a model of Old Testament poetry, because Psalm 1 contains every form of poetry that is used in the rest of the book of Psalms. And so we're going to look at Psalm 1 and we're going to kind of deconstruct it and look at it as a piece of poetry and as the masterwork, which is the key to unlock all the other Psalms. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson. We'll pick up with Psalm 1 next time.